rapidly aging coastal population that has limited consumption needs and, most importantly, hasn't repopulated. That coastal population is stacked against a seething migrant class from the interior that lives in semi-illegal circumstances in hypercramped, near slum-like conditions, working grueling hours and that cannot repopulate. It is all located next to an emptied-out interior whose primary source of economic activity is state investments into an industrial plant that is of questionable economic usefulness, populated by a demographic that is too old to repopulate. This is all in a country where decades of the one-child policy have encouraged selective sex abortions en masse, so there simply are not enough women under 40 to repopulate the country in the first place. The successive waves of hypergrowth, concentrated on the coastal zones where the world can see them, make China's rise seem inevitable. The reality is China has borrowed from its interior regions and its demography in order to achieve what, historically speaking, is a very short-term boost. Never let anyone tell you the Chinese are good at the long game. In 3,500 years of Chinese history, the longest stint one of their empires has gone without massive territorial losses is 70 years. That's right now. In a geopolitical era created by an outside force that the Chinese cannot shape. The Chinese workforce has become more skilled, perhaps doubling, or if you interpret the data kindly, tripling in efficiency since 2000. But because of the country's accelerating demographic collapse, labor costs have gone up by a factor of 15. The majority of the country's economic growth since the turn of the century has come from hyper-financed investment rather than exports or consumption. That hardly makes China irrelevant or backward. It simply shapes what China can and cannot do. Having 1 billion workers to throw at things and heavily subsidizing everything makes China the king of the low end and the emperor of assembly. If you want an Internet of Things meat thermometer that can tell your smartphone how hot your roast is, a cheap chip from China will do just fine. If you want a zippy smartphone so you can post your doctored videos on TikTok, it's best you go with something from the other side of the Taiwan Strait. Thailand and Malaysia form a middle tier in everything from electronics to automotive to, of course, semiconductors. They do very little assembly and instead focus on the heavy lift stuff, both literally and figuratively. If the Japanese, Koreans, and Taiwanese wire the brains, and the Chinese build the body, the Thais and Malaysians put together the guts, such as wiring, mid-tier processors, and semiconductors for things like cars and cranes and climate control systems. The Philippines provides the work that is too low-end for even China. At the opposite end, Singapore has evolved into an etheric, otherworldly presence that excels at finance, logistics, advanced petrochemicals, software, and manufacturing so precision-oriented it is used in the internal workings of things like clean labs. On the edges are newer players looking to find their own niche. Indonesia, with its 250 million people, is lurching bit by bit into China's space. Vietnam is hoping to leverage its dense population clusters, excellent ports, rapidly evolving educational system, and top-down, no dissent allowed political system to jump over China completely and become the next Thailand. India, with all its endless internal variation, hopes to take a bite out of everything. If anything, the above vastly understates the Asian system's complexity. Think of the wild variety of economies just within the American state of California. San Francisco is a tourism and finance hub and the most economically unequal urban area in the country. Silicon Valley designs and innovates many of the products produced throughout Asia, even in high-tech Japan, but has to import everything: concrete, steel, power, food, water, labor. Los Angeles' urban sprawl disguises a wealth of small-scale industrial production sites. The Central Valley is both an agricultural powerhouse and home to some of the country's poorest communities, and that's just one state. Similar patterns and diversity hold true throughout Asia, most notably within the broad swath of mainland China. Greater Hong Kong and Greater Shanghai are by far the country's financial and technological hubs. The North China Plain, home to more than half of China's population, is all about bulk over brains. For a point of reference, the per capita income variation in the United States between the richest and poorest states, Maryland and West Virginia, is just under 2 to 1. In China, the variation between richest and poorest, between ultra-urban coastal Hong Kong and ultra-rural interior Guangzhou, is nearly 10 to 1. Even that understates the possibilities for synergies. Since 1995, China's major cities have added some 500 million people, mostly migrants from the country's ultra-poor interior, absolutely swamping every urban center with ultra-low-cost labor. Multiple, varied cost structures and labor quality abound not just within the country, but within each city. No wonder China has become the workshop of the world. Mesh the multiplicity of options within China with the multiplicity of options across Asia, and it should come as no surprise that this corner of the world is home to fully half of the globe's manufacturing supply chain steps, as well as the source of some 3/4 of the world's electronics, cellular, and computing products. All that's necessary to make it work is a strategic environment that enables ships to sail without risk, enabling the region's myriad labor cost structures to hum along, cranking out products in perfect synergy.